Thanks for tuning in, everybody. JT here, and if you are hearing this, you have once again tuned in the Consequence of Habit podcast. I'm going to start this one asking a favor. I'm trying to get this podcast out there to some more people. So anyone who's already subscribed or liked, I want to say a huge thank you. Anyone else listening to this who enjoys the content, appreciates the guests, their stories, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe, share, like, leave comments, good, bad, I don't, whatever. Just, like, if I'm doing something wrong, please let me know. If I'm doing something right, well, that'd be cool to hear too. So please share this thing. I think these people's stories are important. I think they need to get out there, and let's help each other, man. Hey guys, this, like always, I always mention them before every podcast. And I'm going to be honest with you, they don't even pay me. They don't. I mean that. But I believe in the company. I believe what they're doing. And that's Athletic Brewing, the highest quality non-alcoholic beer company out there, in my opinion, my humble opinion. So if you want to try them out, check them out at athleticbrewing.com. Use promo code JTFrank20. Get yourself 20% off your first order. Hey guys, I'm really excited about this next guest. You may or may not have heard me talk about the Wim Hof method. It's this breathing technique or cold exposure. And it's something I've been doing for the past couple of months. And it's brought value to my life, man. I mean, this whole show is about building new habits. And that's one I've started doing, and I'm seeing a real benefit from it. And as much as I would love to get Wim Hof, the old Iceman himself, on this podcast, well, to be honest, we don't have that kind of pull just yet. Maybe someday. So I was trying to find somebody that was certified in teaching it, and good God, man, I hit a home run. Sometimes when I talk about meditation, depending who in the audience is listening, they have this picture of, I don't know, some guy sitting crisscross applesauce, drinking wheatgrass, and maybe he smells like patchouli oil. This is not that guy. Our next guest is Errol Doebler. Errol was a Navy SEAL. Errol was an FBI agent for 13 years, doing counterterrorism work, hunting terrorists in Afghanistan with the Army Rangers. He's the author of a book called The Process, Art, and Science of Leadership. He was a super humble guy. For a guy with credentials like he does, well, he was about as humble and candid as somebody could be, while still being the most interesting man in the world. But with that said, I'm going to let him tell his story. Please welcome Errol Doebler. All right, Errol, I'm really happy you came on. This is actually, before we get going, I'm going to say this is Errol Doebler. Errol, if they're the most interesting man in the world had a resume, I'm gonna guess it would resemble yours, but maybe not as cool.
Well, JT, I that's it. Let's end the show with that. Thanks for having me on.
And we're out. That's right. So I'm sure this will be in the teaser, but just to run down the bullet points of your career. You are a Naval Academy graduate, correct?
That's right.
From there, you went to the SEAL teams.
Well, I went to the surface Navy first. So okay. I got commissioned. So I was on a ship as an officer first, and then the SEAL teams. And I always like to include that because it's not so glamorous, but that's real work, and there's good stuff coming out of that. But yeah. They're
not showing that in the recruiting video. That's for
not
sure.
Not so much.
But after an injury, you end up spending some time in the private sector. You go on to work for the FBI. Mm-hmm. And with the FBI, you were in a pretty unique position. You were, is it a counterterrorism unit that you were?
Yep. I worked counterterrorism, primarily international terrorism, counterterrorism out of the New York City office. And I specialized in Central Asia. So the former Soviet republics, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. And then I did some Afghanistan and Pakistan work and India. So that was before I moved on to some Russian organized crime and some, just straight violent street gangs.
Yeah.
Those are the highlights of the FBI career. Yeah.
What was really unique about it is during that time you were with the 75th Ranger Regiment. So
yep.
If anyone, and I don't have a ton of knowledge on this, but what the little I do know is there are there's Rangers and then there's the 75th that's doing kind of like the some of the specialized stuff. So it's one thing to be in the Bureau. It's another thing to be in Afghanistan fighting along with the Army Rangers. It's a pretty cool thing. And now and to really balance it off, you are now teaching the Wim Hof method also on top of that. You're an author. When do you plan on curing cancer? Is that coming up soon?
I've got to clean my sock drawer this afternoon, and then I think that's next. I've got that next on my to-do list. But I do like to add in there that I was very proudly also a part of the FBI, the New York FBI SWAT team.
Okay.
Because while my view of the FBI as an organization is fairly dim, I do like to highlight some of the good things there too, right? Some of the best leaders I ever met were in the FBI. It just so happens that there was about a handful of them, and a lot of them were right in that FBI SWAT team, New York SWAT team. So that was a great part of the experience as well.
Gotcha. Okay. So you end up leaving the Bureau after about 13 years, correct?
13 years, that's right.
And from there you branch off and now you're doing your own thing. And that's when is that when you started the Leader 193?
Yeah. So I was pretty sure that I was going to leave. But I put yourself in my shoes, right? I've got a family. At the time that I left, I was in my late 40s. I did sales and sales management back in, 99 through 03 or whatever it was. I wasn't going to go back to beating the street as a salesman. And so what was I going to do? And it turns out my brother-in-law, we were at we were having a party, a Mother's Day party at my house. And he runs a big company. He's super successful. And I'm just kind of expressing my frustration, and I'd like to leave, but I feel like I'm kind of stuck. What is anybody going to hire me for? What am I going to be, a mercenary for somebody, and he's just kind of looking at me like I've got three heads. And I said, what? And he goes, Errol, I pay a guy with half your credentials a boatload of money just to chew on his ear about leadership a couple times a month. Yeah. And I was like, what? That's a thing? Like, I had no idea. So that, I have him to thank. Sheldon Wolitsky, he was the CEO of the Select Group, now chairman of the board. And he just opened my world. I'm like, I didn't even know that thing existed. And so that's when I started saying, all right, what would this look like? What would a consulting firm look like? What do I believe in? And that's pretty much where it started. Once I thought that I had that squared away, that I could leave the FBI and then tell somebody, here's what I'm doing, here's how I'm going to do it, then I left. Yeah.
I bring that up because I don't think everyone understands, you've got military service, you got government service, and those are the exact reasons a lot of times people don't go, is because that guaranteed paycheck, those things like benefits and a pension. I mean, these are really important things. So to, I would say, have the intestinal fortitude to punch out on something like that and then branch off your own, that's not the norm. That takes a lot.
Well, thank you for that. And I can address that too, because that was a big thing. So when I entered the FBI, right, I got myself medically cleared. And so I had 8 years of active service as a naval officer, 4 years at the Naval Academy, and then 1 year at the Naval Academy Prep School. So that's 13 years. I bought that, quote unquote, back right at a very reasonable price. I can't remember what, a few $1,000s, right? Well, what did that mean? That meant that, and I got in the FBI late, so I could only really do 20 years before it was mandatory retirement. But because I bought back that time, I would have retired as if it was 34 years, right? So that's a significant amount of pension to give up. Now, a lot of the people you hear, and I'm not saying that the pension's not important, but I started to do the numbers, right? Because that's all I heard anybody talk about, the pension, the pension, the pension. Right. I said, well, let me take a look at this pension. Let me see, what am I really going to give up? And the long and short of it was this, and again, this is not to disparage anybody, but there's nobody that's retiring fully on the pension and keeping their way of life. They're going to get another job to supplement the pension so they can be about at where their salary was when they left. And that's fine. But once I looked at those numbers, I said, okay, it's not the golden egg. I'm going to bet on myself. I think I can make up that money on my own, right? Now, look, there's a couple things. There's benefits, right? Health insurance, which until you go out on your own, you don't understand how broken our healthcare system is, right? So I spent the better part of my life either in a big corporation or with the government. So healthcare was always there for me. And now I go out on my own. I'm like, oh my God. So anyway, there were some other things, but yeah, the pension was, I had to double check. And then I did just say, I said, I'm going to bet on me and my wife, and we're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that's a big leap. So, kudos to you for making that jump. But my point of going down this list of things is to, if you look on the surface, if you look this on paper, you are doing everything right along the way. And you are the first one to point out in your book that you learn the most from your mistakes. And what I really enjoyed about in the beginning is you went out and just laid them out right out from the very beginning. It was almost like a way of no one else is going to tell you where I messed up. I'm not going to come across as this perfect image. I'm going to do that for you. And then you're going to, I'm going to be vulnerable enough to let you see that, I may have all these credentials, but I've really, I screwed up along the way. So,
well, it's exactly what I wanted to come across. So I appreciate that that's what you got from it, because it's, I'm going to get, some people are going to buy the book from my background alone. That's fine. That's good, right? That's the benefit of having some of that background, right? That goes with the territory, and that's good, because there's a lot to be learned from the things that I did. But I feel like I know how people are. And part of it was the importance of being vulnerable, right? Let's get that out there right away. This is an important aspect of any growth process. You've got to be able to say where you're screwed up. The second part is that I wanted to cut off any troll out there going, so yeah, Errol says this about himself, but did you know this? I just wanted to be like, I just want to get all that out of the way. I'm not pretending to be great. I'm not pretending to be the best thing since a slice of bread. So I'm just going to put it out there and let everybody know I don't think that about myself. So now, if you had a personal experience with me that wasn't fantastic, knock yourself out, because I'll just be like, yeah, I already mentioned that in the book. So you're not pulling the cover back on Oz.
Right. Clearly, you didn't read it because it's in the first 5 pages. So
right, it's right away. It's pretty much right away.
I really appreciate it because, in this day and age, there's a lot of people that, they'll say, hey, I've done A, B, and C. And it does. It looks like they walk on water. And I think you just connect to a lot more people when you come across as, human, like everyone else who's kind of screwed up along the way. But with that said, there's still a lot of positives. And this whole thing of the consequence of habit, like I said before the podcast, there's good consequences and there are bad consequences. And you can hold both those at the same time. You had mentioned that you would in the book that you had a couple academic review boards. Even when you ended up going to the Navy, you had some. You had a couple of issues, in whether it be behavior.
Yep.
Maybe I should start off. Where did you grow up? I'm just trying to kind of map this out. Like how do you get into the academy, while at the same time having some of these, maybe some other issues that you're kind of working through.
So and I really appreciate, your podcast, The Consequence of Habit, because, whether we get to a lot of the book or some of the book, in the end, my process is formed on finding a behavior and then creating a habit out of it, right? That's it. There's going to be certain things that you need to do that become innate in you. which is what a habit is. I grew up in New York, Long Island. I grew up on the water, which may have been lent to some of my affinity to the water and wanting to be a SEAL. You know, how I learned about the SEALs. And remember, you know, I'm 52 years old now. So back when I was a kid, there wasn't the internet. If you wanted to learn about something, you had to go to the library, the card catalog, the whole thing. So my next door neighbors were Naval Academy family. And one of the older boys just one day brought over a book from his dad. You know, it was just it was bigger than a pamphlet, but it was about the Naval Academy. And for whatever reason, he bought it over. I was too young. I wasn't thinking about college or anything like that. And there was this one tiny section on this thing called Navy SEALs. It was a paragraph, and it was a picture, and they weren't even in any cool gear, right? They were just in those little shorts that are starting to come back now that are way too high, and they were like, whoa, what are those? And there was just something about it that spoke to me, whether it was the lack of information in there or that this was a very unique and special group, and it always stuck with me. So when I played football and lacrosse in college, but I certainly wasn't big enough to go to any big time college football programs, right? I could have gone to some Division III stuff, but I was good enough to play good lacrosse. But you know, our neck of the woods, we weren't getting recruited too much out there. I was from Bayshore, and now it's the opposite. There's a lot of recruitment going on out there. But my coach one day was like, Errol, what, you know, no, I said to him, I said, Coach, I don't know where I'm going to go to college. And he said, well, where do you want to go? And I said, it just fell out of my mouth, the Naval Academy. Now, maybe it was because of, right, that book and wanting to be a SEAL in the back of my mind. You know, he called the coach, they came and took a look at me, and then I was able to make it in to the prep school because, you know, generally speaking, the SATs and grades to get in there are exemplary for folks like me who are athletes and prior enlisted folks. You know, they'd say, all right, we're going to give you graduate from the prep school, and then we'll let you go to the academy. So that's where I ended up there. You know, what led me to have a bit of a renegade attitude? Hard to say. You know, it's hard to say. You know, that would be probably a different conversation about upbringing and things like that, and why you feel the need to act out of sorts. Perhaps it's a scream for attention. It's, you know, as I speak and talk about in the book, it's a lack of awareness of emotions that drive your actions, right? So I do something, you know, as a young man, I rebel against certain authority. That all, as I look back on it, comes down to a lack of awareness from emotions. So yeah, you know, that's the first element of the process, emotional awareness and recognition. So it's got to be something in there, right, that led me to behave that way, for sure. Yeah,
and that's actually the reason I bring it up is even in the beginning of your book, which is about leadership, and I want to make sure that it's the process, the art, and the science of leadership. You're talking to, I don't know if it's a real person, but you're talking about a gentleman named Roger, and you're having a conversation with him about getting things done. And you can, through talking to him, you can just tell by some of his behaviors that he's nervous. And the more you start asking questions and trying to elicit these answers, the more you're kind of tapping into what his emotional awareness is.
Yep.
Which, to me, I've never read a leadership book that can come across almost like a psychology book, you know, because this process for me has kind of been the same thing when I started looking at habits and consequences. All right, well, why do we do what we do? And I think you're exactly right. I think there's a lot of stuff that emotionally, whether it's stuff from your kid, adult, feelings you have. And your actions are a lot of times a direct result in these.
I would contend that they're always a direct result, right? Until you have that awareness behind it. Now, you know, and I'll tell people, look, you can have an emotion and you can decide to act on that emotion. That's cool, as long as it's a conscious decision. Okay, that's the key. Because I'll never tell somebody, don't act on your anger, don't act on your frustration, don't act on your. I just won't say that. I'll say, if you're just acting and not aware of the emotion behind it, then you're just you're flipping a coin for the results. So let's not do that. Furthermore, when we say, okay, I'm angry or I'm jealous, and I'm going to act on that, and then you act on it. Now you at least have formulated a thought process where you can go back and say, okay, I can't really trust that emotion anymore to act on that anger thing because I acted on it and here were the consequences. So next time that hits me, let me think twice, okay? Anger, that trigger that angered me, I acted on it last time. Let me try something else. Let me try some compassion. Let me try some patience. Let me try to walk away. Let me try something other than anger. Conscious decision, right? And now we start to learn to trust our instincts and our emotions.
Yeah, I think once you start tapping into those things too, you'll have more empathy for others. Because when you start realizing that people are lashing out, and a lot of times it's just not an awareness of their own emotion, it's easier to go to give people a little more slack. I mean,
you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head, and that's the premise from a leadership part, right? Because somebody may say, well, Errol, all this stuff, you're working with the individual on their own personal things. Well, what does that have to do with leadership? Well, a lot. First of all, your own personal behavior extends to what everybody else is doing. But more importantly, from this emotional awareness and recognition element, the very first thing I start with is when you have that awareness, just like you said, in yourself, innately, you start to become aware of it in others. And now you can start making decisions based on a more full awareness of the situation at hand. So in other words, JT, you do this thing. I ask you to do this. And not only don't you half-ass it, you just blow it off. Right? You don't do it. And instead of me thinking very linear and going, you didn't do this thing or you did this thing, therefore now I will punish you. I can look at it from a leader and go, what would drive JT to do something like that? Just to completely disregard what I said, especially if it's out of character. What emotion might somebody be going through to make them do that, right? There's got to be something. So instead of me saying, JT, why didn't you do this thing? I say, JT, is everything okay? Is everything okay? Is there anything bothering you? Look, you may or may not answer that question, but you may. You may go, well, yeah, my dog just died, right? If my dog died, I'm out for a month, right? Because I love my dogs.
Right. I'm devastated.
Then I get to say, okay, I got it. Now I don't really have to get on you about this thing. I can deal with now how you're just overall acting based on an emotion, and now we can start making some adjustments. That's everything. Now I have shown the connection to you as an individual. I have really gotten to the root of the issue, and I haven't reprimanded you over something that you may not even have realized you've done. So yes, you are right. When we look at that in ourselves first, we see it in those around us, and we can start making way more conscious decisions, way more leadership decisions based on awareness.
Did your understanding of that, did that come, was this a gradual thing? Was this like just an aha moment at some time in your time in the Navy, the Bureau, wherever, where all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I get it?
Yeah, it was a gradual thing, because just like then I talk about, hey, congratulations, Errol. Isn't that great? You got to the Naval Academy, a very prestigious school. Well, why did I allow myself to continue to get in trouble? Right? Why did I allow myself to continue to not dedicate myself to the art of academia, right? And go to 2 performance, academic review boards. What was it that stopped me from allowing things to go right? Right? Something would go right. I felt like I needed to counterbalance it with something to go wrong. We call that the self-sabotage syndrome, right? And there's a lot behind that, for sure. That being said, when I left the SEAL teams, I loved being a SEAL. I wanted to be a SEAL for my entire career. I got injured, and I was in the throes of perhaps the worst marriage ever, right? And trust me, it was just as much my fault as it was her fault, probably more my fault. So, I'm not placing blame on that. But the point I'm making is when you leave an organization in less than the terms you want. I left with my tail between my legs. I got injured. Okay. I couldn't operate anymore. I was secretly abusing my pain medication, along with having this awful relationship. And, as young, immature couples do, we were just looking for areas to hurt each other. And she didn't. She just picked up the phone and called my SEAL command and just started saying, Errol's this, Errol's that, right? So now I'm getting called to the carpet. I'm both arms in casts. I'm dazed on drugs, right? Because, all of these reasons, right? I'm still, and, eventually I just get so embarrassed that when the time comes and they say your injuries are severe enough to be medically discharged, but they said, Errol, a lot of guys like you don't get out because they just want to stay in and help out any way they can. I was like, no, I'm going, because I'm so humiliated right now, and I don't have the courage, quite frankly, to continue to go through this. And that's really what it was. Now, would I have stayed in if everything was in my personal life was fine? I'm not sure. I don't know. And it's irrelevant, because that's not what happened. But it was at that moment. And I remember when I was driving home, I was driving across country, because I was in California at the time. I was going to go back to New York. And that's a lot of time to think. And I'm like, man, you need to start figuring out how this happened. How did you get into a position where you had to leave something you love so much because you were embarrassed? What were you doing? And it was then, that was the beginning of that reflection. Why is it that every time something went right, I had to do something to fuck it up and make it go wrong? Okay. And then what could I do going forward? And so years and years and years, right, of looking at that stuff. And you make small adjustments along the way. You start to gain more perspective. You do your research. You start to become introspective. And that was it. So yes, it was a very gradual process, but based on something that struck me to the core, and that was leaving the SEAL teams under circumstances that I wasn't proud of.
So you leave the SEAL teams, and it wasn't that long after, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm doing this off memory, that 9/11 ends up happening. I imagine after leaving the SEAL teams, and actually I've heard you talk about in other podcasts that you're a loss of identity when you're wrapped up in something. Hey, I'm Errol Doebler, and I'm a Navy SEAL, and now that's gone. And to amplify that, you've spent so much time being a SEAL training, and now the biggest stage that you can imagine erupts, and you're not in anymore.
That's right.
What did that feel like? What was your process in dealing with that, and what were your actions?
There was a lot. So there's a lot to that question. So I started in the private sector in 99. So I was in Manhattan 2001 on business, and we were downtown. So I was a couple blocks away from where the destruction ended, if that makes sense, right? So I'm not trying to be dramatic and be like, so I was almost right there, but that's where we were, right? If I had walked 2 blocks south, the rubble would have been there, right? And so we were watching this. As a matter of fact, I was in Starbucks when the first plane hit. Somebody comes running in and is like, hey, a helicopter ran into the World Trade Center. I literally walked out, me and a few other people looked down the street. You could see it. Be like, wow, that's awful. I hope everybody's okay. And then you go about your business, right? Yeah, something happened in the city. And then obviously I get back to the hotel, and now we're the hotel room and we're watching the whole thing. In any event, I realized, oh shoot, my brother-in-law works there. So I called my sister. I said, hey, where is he? And she's like, he went into work he had quit, and he went into work to pick up his final paycheck and say goodbye to everybody. Oh. Yeah. So I ran to see her. She was up on the Upper East Side. And, we went around, it was like you read about. We went around to all the hospitals with everybody else. The streets were barren, right? It was like a ghost town. And, here's his picture, here's his name. Everybody at every hospital, boy, they were something else. They just went through the procedure. No, he's not here. Leave us your number. We'll call you, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that 9/11 impacted me on several, and my brother-in-law didn't make it. He did end up dying in the Trade Center. And that, look, you want to talk about consequence, that turned my sister's life around in such a way too. But anyway, so the impact of 9/11 was very real to me because I was there and all this stuff, and I saw the whole thing. And then, yes, I looked forward and I said, if I didn't get out, where would I be? I was scheduled to go to SDV Team 1, and then I was going to put my paperwork in to go to development group, right? They'd be calling me now to go do this fight. So, yeah, it wasn't very hard. It pretty much, after a week or so dealing with the personal stuff that was happening, I started reaching out, right? How do I get back in this game? And then the FBI and the CIA were the two obvious choices. Getting back into the Navy, I could have done, but it wouldn't have been in the capacity that would have satisfied what I wanted. Mm-hmm. I had to get medically cleared. And anyway, long story short, then I hit the FBI. So I joined the FBI in 2003. So it takes that long for the process to play out, for me to get in. And I specifically requested, when I was at the FBI Academy, I said, I really want to work terrorism in Central Asia, because I'd done my homework and I'm like, that's the spot nobody's looking at. Everybody's looking at Al-Qaeda, which is, they needed to. But these groups that I ended up investigating, they were like the hitmen for Al-Qaeda, right? They were like, okay, I'm Al-Qaeda and I want something really bad to happen. Let's call the Uzbeks because they'll do anything. They're psychopaths, right? Anyway, that's kind of the story and the journey of getting to the FBI, and that drove the whole thing.
Yeah, that's that must have been. I only asked that question because I'd gone in. I was enlisted in the Air Force in '95, and I got out. Mm-hmm. I got out in 2000, and I was putting in like security doors, those big metal doors in like some of the worst parts of Sacramento. Mm-hmm. I was driving to work, and I was listening to Howard Stern, and the first one hits, and he's starting to mention terrorism, and then the second one, and I just remember, I'd been out for maybe 6-7 months at that time, and I had a kind of a negative taste in my mouth by the time I left, and I just remember, God, it was like watching a sports team go in that you'd been on but decided you didn't want to be on it anymore, and now they're actually doing something. And it was a really weird feeling, and took a while to process that. So I don't even think it's probably at the same level, especially with it hitting so close to home and being a family member that was unfortunately perished in it. Man, that's got to be a tough pill to swallow.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot to what you're saying too. That whole, again, consequences, right? The grass is greener on the other side. At least it sounded like in your perspective, right? I was ready to stay in, and again, I've just explained my circumstances as to why I left. So I didn't have so much of that regret, right? Like, damn, I left too early, right? Yeah. I didn't have that, but I do appreciate, because I've been in your spot. Grass is greener, let me leave, whatever it was. Oh, damn. Damn, right? And as far as the identity piece goes, that was a lot. And I talk to people about identity a lot. If you're identifying yourself as something that can be taken away from you, I recommend you find another place to identify yourself. And what does that mean? It can be anything. Right? I'm a podcast host. Well, what happens when that's taken away from you? Right? I'm a SEAL. Well, that was taken away from you. As morbid as this sounds, I'm a parent. Okay? Well, my parents were no longer the parents of their daughter. Now, in their spirit, in their heart, they were. And again, that's a tough thing for me to say, but it's accurate. But what can you identify yourself as, right? A leader, someone of compassion. Right? There's things that you can identify yourself as that nobody can take away, that makes you a better parent, right? That makes you a better podcast host. But no matter what happens, you can still be that person that you identify with. And that's the trick. I don't know what the right answer is for everybody. And I'm not even sure if what I'm saying is good sound advice. But that was my process for sure.
No, I think it is. I think, I mentioned probably every single podcast that I follow and try and study like a Stoic philosophy, and a lot of that, is separating yourself from things like your identity, and really one of the things that drew me to your story is you were, if you look at the Naval Academy, you look at the SEALs, you look at the Bureau, these are filled with egocentric men and women.
Yep.
And then you take your time with teaching the Wim Hof method, which is, actually, can you break down just so the listeners have a better clue? I speak about it here a little bit, but you're at a higher level and can explain it.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do it pretty quickly because, again, the egocentric thing in the FBI and the SEAL teams, that'll be something interesting to get back to, because that's all true, but it manifests itself differently in both organizations. But anyway, the Wim Hof method is, there's a guy named Wim Hof, right? And for lack of a better term, he is a Dutch extreme athlete. But really what he is a pioneer now, and that's not an overstatement. He is a pioneer in showing the scientific community that we actually have control, the ability to manipulate and regulate our autonomic nervous system, right? Our sympathetic and our parasympathetic systems. He's done this and through the practice of cold exposure via ice baths or some type of cold shower, and his very unique breathing technique, which is a very aggressive, almost hyperventilation. He calls it hoffulation, but it serves a purpose. It serves a very specific purpose to tap into your autonomic nervous system and manipulate it, which increases our ability or increases the strength of our immune system. Reduces inflammation in the body, which we know now inflammation is a key driver. It's caused by stress, among other things, key driver to every illness out there, depression, cancer, you name it.
Right.
It's that. So, and what he did was, what Wim Hof says is, I'm not the first person to do these things. I am not the first person to submerge myself in cold and remain calm. I am not the first person to do a very extreme breathing, to hack into my system and do all the things that happens in your mind and your spirit. He goes, and he's right. He's the first person to bring it to science. They're literally rewriting the science books based on what he's done and how he's done it, because he doesn't do anything anymore without a team of scientists. So that is Wim Hof in a nutshell. I have become a Wim Hof method instructor, and I apply that in my leadership process very much as a tool to practice my leadership principles and processes. But I also just do straight Wim Hof session seminars because they're so damn fun, and people just get so excited and they leave like different people. So that's Wim Hof in a nutshell.
Okay. All right. So we're going to table that because I want to come back to that, but I don't want to miss. You started talking about the ego with the military and the Bureau and how it manifests itself a little differently. So if you could explain that.
Yeah. So the differences between the FBI and the SEAL teams. Okay. They're both exciting jobs. I loved being a special agent for the FBI. I just did not like the FBI organization and environment its leadership created. And the opposite in the SEAL teams. I loved being a SEAL, and I loved the environment that it created. There are the SEAL teams are the SEAL teams, and SEALs are unique because there's truly nothing that we don't think we can do. And I mean that in the utmost humility, right? But so somebody hears that and say, well, wait a second. That's a lot of ego, right? How can you say you believe there's nothing you can't do and say that with humility? I don't know, but I do say it with humility. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think there's anything I can't do. And when we were, as a group of SEALs, as a group of young men, and now they're allowing women to come in, which is great. I don't think there is one in there yet, but that day will come and it'll be an exciting day. So when I say men right now, just because that's what it is, you get a group of young men together, and your general thought process is, we can do that. With that, there is a humility that has to say, okay, but we don't know how. Okay, right? But we don't know how yet. You have to be able to be humble enough to say, we can definitely do it. We just don't know how. Who has an idea, right? That's humility.
Yeah.
That's basically it, right? I might have an idea, but I need to hear somebody else's idea because their idea might be better. Because one way or the other, one of us is going to come up with the idea to get this done because we know we can do it. That's humility, right? So that's the distinction. Now, for the best people that I met in the FBI, that's how they operated, right? So when I was on Russian organized crime, and one of the many bosses I had on terrorism, and there was a couple, that's how they operated, right? I would say, I can do this. And they would be like, okay, how are you going to do it? I said, I'm not sure yet. I need a little help, but I know there's an answer out there, right? And they had the answer, right? But they were great because they were like, all right, if you think you can do it, just tell me how first. And I said, I don't know. I showed humility, but I had an ego. But if I get on the right track, I will definitely do it, okay? Now, the problem was, generally speaking in the FBI, right, the expectation of good leadership, strong but measured ego with humility was the norm in the SEAL teams. If you were a craphead who didn't operate that way, you were an outlier. People recognized you. They're like, what is that guy doing? In the FBI, it was the opposite. The expectation was of poor leadership, misplaced ego. I know what to do, and I will not listen to you and your ideas. You will do it my way. And if you don't do it my way, I'll make you pay. I'll remind you who's in charge here. Right. Okay. And that's it in a nutshell. And I think that if you talk to anybody in the FBI, whether they agree with me wholeheartedly, they will say, yes, he's accurate, right? Even the person who loves the FBI more than anything in the world will acknowledge that's true. I think the general people will say, yeah, that's the problem with the FBI, that poor leadership is the norm. And it's people who have gotten themselves in charge and are not willing to say, hey, if you have your way that you think you can do it, makes sense. You're not breaking the law. You're accounting for safety. Yeah, all right, knock yourself out. It's not how I would do it, but okay. And if you want to hear how I would do it, I'll tell you, right, if that helps you. It was like fighting tooth and nail. And you can imagine me coming from that environment in the SEAL teams where they expected you to say, I can do this, here's how, or if I don't know how right now, I'll find out, and then I'll come tell you, okay, to, oh, Errol, here's how you're going to do it. Well, I don't think that'll work, right? JT, you're my boss now. You say, Errol, I want you to go do this thing and do it this way. And I go, well, but I think I would be more comfortable doing it this way. That kind of fits more my thing. Right. Here's why. No, you'll do it my way. Well, now that natural rebelliousness that I worked so many years to curb comes out a little bit. But anyway, that just becomes tiring. And that's really ultimately why I left, because I couldn't take it anymore. It was too exhausting. And but that's the difference, right? So ego, yeah, but ego's not bad as long as it's attached to something good, like a good, solid humility. Like I'm willing to ask, I'm willing to say, I don't know how to do this, but I know when I figure it out, I'm going to crush it. Okay,
right.
So
right, and that goes back to an emotional awareness and knowing who's driving the ship. You know, you can be confident that you can get it done with still understanding that you still need to learn what the fuck you're doing and what is the process to get that done.
That's right. And so the bosses who would not hear from you or did not like your ideas, right? They suffer from a lack of emotional awareness and recognition. Because why would you do something like that? We're all professionals. We all have to go through the same training. We are all competent. There's only one reason why you wouldn't allow somebody to do something differently than you, and that's because of an insecurity of some sort that you're not acknowledging. Right. That you're not saying, I am insecure because this person, it doesn't have to be me. There's people like me that it's happened to all over the place. That you're saying, I'm insecure because that person seems very confident in what they're doing, and I think they're going to get it done, and I probably wouldn't be able to do that. So therefore, I have to show them who's boss, right? That's an action based on an unacknowledged emotion. Yeah. And that's what bad leadership is.
Hey, has some of the time, and because I want to get into some of the breathing techniques, but with Wim Hof, but in doing these breathing techniques and the time you've spent in the cold, has that made your understanding of all the things we've already talked about? Has it expanded that? Does it play into those things at all, or is it its own separate island?
No, it's all connected, and it's connected for me and my leadership process in a very specific purpose. So I'll start with the general thing about it, right? So once I started doing it, and I immediately went into the first phase of the instructor thing, which is WIM's 10-week online course that anybody can take. You don't have to want to be an instructor to take it. It's just a good way to get people started. You begin to just see things a little different, right? You do the breathing, okay? Well, by definition now, we know the breathing alleviates the stress. It kind of balances out your autonomic nervous system. So any extreme stress you were feeling and the impact of it will be mitigated by the breathing. Now, what's the best measure of something that you're doing? It's your wife telling you, I don't know what it is you're doing with this breathing thing, but you're never allowed to stop, right? Right? After like a week, okay? Literally, that's what she said, right? Because I had just started the business, right? We were, when you start any business, you're grinding, right? You're worried about money. It's not coming in like it was. What are we going to do? This, that, and the other thing. So there's just a natural stress. And I was emanating that stress in clearly a negative way, right? One that didn't create a good environment, right? One that had everybody around me on eggshells. And then this thing starts, and she says, I don't know. Literally, she says, all joking aside, she goes, I don't know exactly what you're doing. I know it's this breathing thing and you're going to keep doing it. She goes, but you can't stop. You're a different person. You're not, you're still stressed, but you're just handling it differently. You're not acting out on it. You're just managing it, right? She just was confused. Okay. Same thing with the ice bath. Now, when you go into the ice bath, the same concept is happening. If you get into the ice bath and your intention is to not grit your way through it, right? Because there'll still be some physiological benefits of the cold to your internal system if you just get in and grit.
Right.
But what we don't want to do, we want to take it better than that. We want to say, how do I remain calm, right, in the cold? And without going into all the physiological and science behind it, basically what happens is when you get into the ice bath, you recognize the symptoms of that induced panic attack, because that's all it is. And then you realize that your breath and your focus on one thing, which is your breath, will serve to calm you down. That serves to reset your nervous system, okay? And it serves to, you can't hide from the cold. So when you talk about, I will act with intention, I will act with focus, I will act with emotional awareness. If you go into the cold with those intentions or something other than those intentions and just scatterbrained, if you're thinking, I can't believe I'm in here. This is so cold. I can't wait to get out. This is so stupid. Blah, 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 blah. How much longer? You're not going to make it. Yeah. When you go in with, this is awful, but let me focus my attention on one thing, because my intention is to maintain my control through my breath. Right now, I know physiologically that the breath calms me down. And you want to learn about how do you practice emotional awareness and recognition, right? If that's a really key thing that you and I are talking about right now that drives habit and consequence, right? You are acting on an emotion, okay? If your habit, okay, is to learn and recognize your emotions, how do you practice that? Well, I can promise you one thing. If you're standing there staring at a bucket of ice that you're going to get into, you're going to have an emotion. And if your intention beforehand is to recognize that, now you are practicing that. And there will be consequences behind that practice, good consequences. There'll be an awareness, right? So, I could obviously go on and on about the Wim Hof method, but hopefully that covers a little bit just from the personal standpoint and then how I use it from a professional standpoint. It's a tool to practice the elements of my process.
Yeah, I did the breathing right before. I'm still new to it, but I did the breathing right before I started the podcast, and I started doing that just because, because I get a lot of times I'm nervous prior to these things, and I found it really makes a substantial difference, just in my own kind of anxiety level, and it's really odd. I've talked to other people that have actually gone through. I've talked to a gentleman that actually went to one of your seminars in Atlantic City, and he said it was crazy that they were doing a breathing exercise, and someone had asked him, hey, how long do you think you're doing this for? And he said, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And it was like an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah. No, that's what I always, so now if somebody's listening to this, they've got the secret, but that's okay. Everybody, no, it's okay.
All right.
When we do it, I don't tell everybody how long we're going to breathe for. Because if I tell them we're going to breathe for 50 minutes, people are going to bail. Like, I'm not, that's ridiculous. So I said, just go through the breathing. Don't worry about it. We'll cover this, right? And I ask everybody at the end, how long have we been breathing? I've had people say 5 minutes, about 5 minutes. And when the answer is 50 minutes, people don't believe it. So I show them the watch and then they look at the clock and they're like, oh my God. The point is that, especially for people who have anxiety, right, who think that they can't sit still, they can't, focus on one thing. I have ADHD. I'm like, that's cool. We'll see what we can do. And then I said, well, you just sat here for 50 minutes and you thought it was 5 minutes. Something tells me that you can overcome your ADHD. I'm not saying that's not a real thing, but what I am saying is we have become so reliant now on the medication to stem these challenges.
Right.
We forget that we possess it, and now scientifically backed through just nature and our breath, right? You talk about, so that's it. So that is a true story. What that person told you, that is exactly the way it goes down. And that is my favorite part of the seminars. Everybody thinks the ice bath is the thing. By the time they're done with the breathing, the ice bath they're like, whatever, I'm good. Let's go into this ice bath. I have no problem with this. It's the breathing that just makes people's minds explode.
Oh, man, it is. It's got me excited. It's got me really excited where just the other day was the first time I had done, I don't know if you call them cycles or and just to explain what we're talking about and stop me because you're the expert on this, but you would go for approximately 30 really intentional big breaths. After that, you on the bottom of the breath, you're holding your breath until you can't hold it anymore. And,
that's right.
And then you take in a deep breath, hold it for 15 seconds and start that process over.
Yep.
And I got done and I felt, I felt like a calmness and just a sense of peace I hadn't felt through. If I had felt it through meditation, it had taken a really long time. This was like taking, a rocket ship instead of an elevator to get to someplace. And I was really, really impressed by it. And I'm excited to explore more. I'll say
well,
that. So
2 points on that. So first thing, and I guess this is a shameless plug, but I'm on your podcast to plug my stuff. Right, so, but we developed it's not an app yet. We made it kind of it's a web page.
Okay.
And it will eventually, but it's something that you can download onto your phone. And I've just had enough people say, Errol, I wish I had your voice and your music to go through this, because having someone guide you through it is better. So we did that, a 20, a 40, and a 60-minute session of me doing my stuff. But then we've also included some explanation behind it and a blog section, a community section, very specific to every post I have, specifically to the Wim Hof method. And we're going to start I'm doing this thing called 365 days at 36.5 degrees. I'm kind of in the middle of it, but basically I'm chronicling what happens when you do that, right? If I go every day in an ice bath and it's in 30 something degree temperature, what can we expect? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? So we'll start to put challenges out there. Can we do it for 5 days? Can we do it for 2 weeks? Whatever it is. So anyway, that's coming. If you want to get on the mailing list, just go to my website, leader193.com. And that's the first part. So that's out there, right? Okay. The second part that you brought up that I want to touch, though, is meditation. I used to think everybody knows meditation is good for you, right? But so many people can't do it, right? Errol, I try to meditate and I can't. I don't know how, right? And the question I ask everybody now is, because I was the same way, and it was the Wim Hof method that made me realize, wait a second, this is meditation. I got it, right? So I found my spot, right? And but what is meditation? Meditation, by definition, is an awareness of where your mind is. Awareness, the first two elements of my leadership process: emotional awareness, cultural awareness, right? How do we feel? And then what do we do based on those feelings? That's our culture, right? And awareness. So if I say to you, okay, JT, here's what you need to focus on in the Wim Hof breathing. You focus on one thing. When you're breathing, focus on your breath. Just following your breath, right? That's it. And when your mind moves away from your breath, which it inevitably will, like, okay, I'm breathing. Oh, I've got this to-do list I need to do. Oh, wait a second, work. Right. Oh, I'm so mad at my kids. All right. No. And the second that you see your mind going away from your breath, you bring it back. You're meditating. You are aware of where your mind is. That is now another skill that has consequence. And you create an awareness of where your mind is. It doesn't matter that if inside of a minute your mind wanders and you bring it back 100 times, if you recognize it every time and you bring it back, you're meditating. The next time you do it, you're going to be a little bit better. The next time you do it, you're going to be a little bit better. So you focus on one thing, where your mind is, right? And where just, it could be in the breath hold, right? Well, what do you focus on during the breath hold? I tell people, focus on your mind's eye, even during the breathing. Just get to that third eye. You'll see it and just focus on that, right? The second your mind moves away from it, bring it back, you're meditating. If after you're done with the breathing and you want to go into a more traditional meditative state, same thing. Focus on one thing. It could be your mind's eye, and wherever that brings you, go with it, trust it. It could be an elevated emotion that you want to think about, that you need to feel. So start feeling it now in advance of something happening to make you feel, right? So I need to feel more gratitude. Well, I'm not going to wait for something good to me to happen to feel gratitude. Let me just feel it now.
Right.
So I meditate on that emotion. The second that my mind moves away from it, you bring it back. You're meditating. Because that helps everybody who I've talked to, because they're like, oh, is that it? That's meditation? That's it.
It's not some mystical thing that you need to be in a yoga pose for 3 hours. And what I think is great about it too is when you have people that come in with your credentials and you start talking about things like a third eye and meditation, that's not the norm, right? Like the communities that you were around, and even maybe in the military, if somebody started talking about their chakra, their third eye, or how they're meditating or holding their breath for something, you would be laughed out of the room. Yeah. But the more people I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of vets, either on this podcast or other podcasts, and I love the fact that these avenues of self-healing are becoming more popular. They're not just, and we're understanding that if you're just relying on a pill that the VA is going to give you, there's a good chance you're going to be disappointed or get worse.
Or get worse. Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that to knock on the VA. Their intention is to get everybody healthy. That's what they want. It's just, it can't always be done through pharmaceuticals. So
no. And that's where my background, that's where I do leverage my background, right? Because I don't get a whole lot of people calling me a woo-woo hippie propaganda sissy boy, right?
Right.
Because I'm talking about emotion. So that's good. So we've got the tough guys and girls coming in. Hey, if he's saying it, cool. We've got the people who always kind of felt it. Now they feel hey, this guy's got my back, right? He gets it too. So, hey, we're all good. So yeah, of course I do. And look, and I relay stories about my background where emotional awareness and recognition is so important. If you don't have it, you're going to get somebody killed, for God's sakes. Yeah. Not least of all yourself. If I can share a quick story though, about kind of that PTSD thing and the medication. So I'm out on and I tell this story a lot, but it's an important story because it goes to your point. I'm out on a call early when I first started my business. So I'm a little early. I'm in Philadelphia, and I duck into a coffee shop. I always have a book with me, and I'm reading Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last. It's an excellent book, but the opening chapter opens up with this guy named Johnny Bravo, and he's a fighter pilot, and he's describing how he's covering this special operations unit on the ground. Okay. And he goes through the whole scenario, and he's describing the terrain and how the special operations unit got into a firefight. They were ambushed and the whole thing. And I'm relating to it all, right? Because, all right, hey, he's clearly describing Afghanistan. I think I know exactly where he's talking about, because there's only a few places you go voluntarily that are that dangerous. Mm-hmm. Certainly the firefights and the ambushes and the cover. I'm enjoying the story immensely, right? I truly am, right? And then I realize I'm looking down at the book. It's covered. It's wet because I'm sweating all over it. My hands are shaking, right? I'm having a panic attack.
Yeah.
So what happens? What do I do? Well, first of all, I start to do extra panic because I realize I'm having a panic attack. Like, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. I'm in Starbucks, right? So that gets me a little more jacked up. But, and this is an absolute true story. So I said, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. I recognize it. I recognize what's happening. I recognize my emotion, right? To put it to my process. Okay. But then I say, all right, what now? Okay. What do I do now? And I think to myself, well, I know this. I know this panic attack because I've seen it before. When have I seen it before? Every time I step into an ice bath. That is an induced panic attack. Right? Yeah. That's all it is. I literally went to that and said, okay, well, what do I do then? Okay, well, I know, focus on one thing, focus on your breath. When you exhale, I know from the science, it activates the vagus nerve, which serves to calm you down, right? So if I keep focusing on the noise of my panic attack, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. Oh my God, I'm sweating. Oh my God, my hands are shaking. Oh my God, it's in the middle of a public place. Oh my God, look at these people. I'm not going to get past it. But when I focus on one thing and it's my breath, and I know that I can calm that down because it's how I calm myself down in the ice bath 100 times before that, that's what I did. I took 2 of those and I was calm. Now, that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is I go home, right? I go to my meeting, everything's fine. I go home, I tell my wife what happened. She says, well, do you have PTSD? And I said, maybe, right? That was 2017. I was in Afghanistan in 2010. That would have been where it stemmed from, right? Because I saw a lot of combat there.
Right.
But I said, maybe I have PTSD. She said, well, do you need to go see somebody? And I said, I have no problem going to see somebody. I truly don't.
Right.
But then I said, but what are they going to try to get me to do? They're going to try to get me to mitigate the effects of the panic attack. And I've already shown that I can do that. Now, my wife, like any good wife, doesn't listen to anything I say because I'm typically wrong. But even she had to acknowledge, I think you might be right. And I said, what's more, then what are they going to try to do? They're going to say, here, take this pill in the meantime to calm yourself down. I said, why would I do that to myself? Yeah. So, she agreed. And she's like, all right, well, let's watch it. Nothing really has happened since. And if anything has, that's where I go, right? So that's what happens to people with PTSD. They just keep reliving that thing over and over and over and over again and don't have a mechanism to reset their nervous system. That's all this is a mechanism to reset your nervous system. Yeah. And then we can work on the other parts of it.
Yeah. I started dealing with a little bit of anxiety later on in life and in my job, I talk to a lot of people. I'm in front of people on a fairly regular basis, and I would get nervous like anybody else. But I was walking from the back of the room to the front of the room. I was gonna, in my head, I had this great point. I was gonna tell these people. Somebody else was giving it. It was talking. They said, "Hey, do you have something to say, JT?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And I was gonna go drop some knowledge on them. And somewhere between the back of the room and the front of the room, things went terribly wrong, and the walls kind of closed in on me, and I turned around and I went to go speak, and I couldn't get words out, and the pitch of my voice had changed, and I kept kind of clearing my throat as if I had something in it, which I was just trying to buy time. And from that point on, I dealt with an anxiety of being in front of people and in my own head fighting it. Just trying to fight this thing, like push it down.
That's right.
And that doesn't work. Right. So no. It wasn't until, and I can't even say this, that I've got it all figured out, but it wasn't, there's an acceptance of it and then trying different things like you're talking about to kind of talk yourself down a little bit, and understanding, hey man, I've got anxiety. And I've talked to some great people on the podcast, some with PTSD, some with addiction, and they're, they've started using pills to try and do the exact thing. They're trying to numb whatever is going on in their head. And just like you were humble in the beginning of the book or candid about your own things, I love the fact some of these guys will get on stage and they go, look, just so you know, I am freaking the F out inside right now. Like I'm not great. And if that doesn't bring, as you shed light on that, it just kind of makes a lot of those things kind of go away and people can accept it. They get it.
Well, if I could just jump on that, because as we talk about, so my book is called The Process, Art, and Science of Leadership. Okay. I've got 5 elements to the process that we always need to be looking at. Inside of each one of those elements, there's an art, because it's going to be different for everybody, right? How you execute a planning process or how you present it will be different than how I present it. But we all agree we need to have a planning process, right? That's one of the elements, for example. What's the science part of this? Okay. When I was writing my book, I was also studying the brain and how does the brain work and how do you do behavioral change? And what I came to find was that my leadership process follows the process that the brain goes through for behavioral change, literally to rewire it, all starting with emotions and then, onward we go. Mm-hmm. But I want to address what you were saying as far as the science. So we talk about that anxiety, right? And emotions. Okay, well, the first thing about an emotion, when we push it down, right, that is called an unacknowledged emotion. And scientists will say that is where, that is in your unconscious mind. Okay, not your subconscious mind, your unconscious mind. Okay. Because everything in your body and mind has a purpose, to include your emotions. And if you don't acknowledge it, it's got to go somewhere, right? The body's a closed system. It doesn't just pop out of your, thank God that one's gone. Yeah. Now, what the science says from a while back, and I can't remember the name of the author, and he's since passed away, but he put forward that things like chronic back pain and migraine headaches were nothing more than the result of unacknowledged emotions that had to be manifested in some way. And if you are not manifesting it by acknowledging it, it's going to manifest itself in back pain, in shoulder pain, in migraine headache. And they tried to not disbar him, but whatever it is when a medical doctor, they take his license away.
Right.
And they couldn't, because he had the evidence to show that he was correct, right? But God forbid, the medical community has to deal with, oh, wait a second, I have this back pain that I've been giving you money for these pills and all this stuff, and you're telling me all I have to do is acknowledge that I've got some inherent insecurities that I need to deal with?
Yes.
Whoa, that's no good. We don't want that, right? No. So that's the first thing. That is now science. That's not, there's a lot of Dr. John Sarno, Healing Back Pain, I think is the name of the book. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing, though, is about that emotions that we were talking about, or how we were feeling. So some of the data tells us with the brain that we have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts per day. Okay, the data then tells us that 80 to 90% of those thoughts are the same as the day before. The research further tells us that for most people, a majority of people, so over 50% of people, 70% of those thoughts are related to the emotions of stress, anger, frustration, worthlessness, anxiety, right? Whatever it is. Think about this, right? We know that the emotions of stress are the things that cause the inflammation in our body, and now we know inflammation is the key driver towards anxiety, depression, and then all these other diseases. So we have a thought, okay? PTSD. I am thinking about something terrible that happened to me. If you believe the data, the research, that means I thought it yesterday. I will definitely be thinking it today. And I will definitely be thinking it tomorrow and next week. And now what's happening is your brain is getting wired for that. You are becoming neurochemically addicted to behaviors based on an emotion. And what's more, and I don't use the term addict very lightly. I've got experience with addiction in my family and with my friends, so I don't say this lightly. But like any addict, you need more of what you are addicted to satisfy that. So if you are addicted to a drug, right? One line of cocaine isn't going to do it for you a year from now. If you are addicted to that, you're going to need 2 lines. You're going to need 4 lines. You're going to need something else, right? That's the way addiction works.
Right.
Same thing with our neurochemical addictions to emotions. I am frustrated. I am afraid at this thing. And I have a very specific event in mind. But now, as time goes on, just thinking about that event isn't satisfying my addiction for frustration or for whatever it is. So now I've got to find everything in my environment to satisfy that addiction, whether it's there or not. Right. That's what's happening. So that's why people have PTSD, because they're thinking the same thoughts over and over and over again, and they're not doing the things that we need to rewire. The first thing generally is acknowledging that emotion, and then the rest of my process talks about it. But yeah, so I hope I didn't go too far down a rabbit hole, and it was to your point about a lot of this stuff. There's a scientific reason why people get into these conditions.
No, not at all. And it's we've had other guests. I just had a gentleman named Rusty Wiles on here, and he's a fireman, and he's had to leave work for 3 months. Was contemplating he was just in a really dark place. And I also believe, aside from PTSD and even in anxiety, I agree. The more you push these things down, that there's no place for it to go. And I had said, I compared it to like a pressure cooker. It only can take so much, and then it will start leaking here and there. And these are signs that you've got something going on that you got to deal with.
Yeah.
And I think when you mix those types of things with whether it be a law enforcement, fireman, military background, where that machismo, like that, where things can be looked at as a weakness instead of going, hey, this person really needs help. Let's talk about these things. That's a perfect storm to start seeing what we've seen. I'm sure since people were at war, but specifically, this generation.
Yeah. So. And look, the obvious place to look at is these areas that you're talking about: law enforcement, firemen, military. But man, it's everywhere. Yeah, and we're not comparing. It's not a contest.
Right.
What's ailing you is ailing you. Okay. What ails you may not ail me, and vice versa. It doesn't mean mine's better or worse. Right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So it still has the same impact, right? I got into a car accident, and I just can't seem to get it out of my mind. And it's now, it stresses me out. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Now you're in it.
No, it's a good point to make sure that it's not a competition. And I think, even talking to this guy, Rusty, he says, I almost felt weird saying it because PTSD had been so associated with the military. But you're exactly right. I mean, that anybody can have something that they can't get out of their head. Okay, Errol, I don't want to keep you on here any longer, but when we talk about habits, just give us a quick rundown on what your day is, as far as your positive habits, or maybe even some of the ones that you're trying to change.
Okay, great. I love answering that question. So what I've done is I have created some habits that, based on a lot of experimentation, mostly around the breathing and the cold exposure. I'm a big exercise person as well. But what I've found is what starts me out correctly on the day. Okay. I don't and never have liked exercising in the morning. Every time I do it, I'm always happy I did it.
Right.
Okay. But I don't like it. I've never liked it. And it's weird because it's really all I've ever done. But so now I take my exercise at a later part of the day. What I've found is I wake up early, and I don't wake up early to prove some point that I can wake up early. I wake up early because I need hours. I have 3 kids. I have a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 18-month-old. Right. So once they're awake, you're working around them.
Right.
So I get up at 4:30. Right. That gives me hours that I need. And I make sure I start those days with either breathing and Wim Hof breathing and meditation, or cold exposure. Right, I get into my ice bath. I've got a 15 cubic foot meat freezer that's filled with water all the time, so that's not a big deal. Or both of those. Okay, I start with those, and I start now with the things that I've learned through this, the things that I try to present to people. Good, strong intention, right? Guidelines for behavior. And I make it sometimes just on the day. based on what I feel, right? Sometimes I just need to be, I'm stressed. I need to have great gratitude for my life, because stress is okay, but keep it in perspective. I might breathe and meditate on gratitude, or get into that ice bath, and that's my focus. That's my intention, right? Sometimes it's, man, you need some confidence. You need to knock some stuff down today, right? That's okay. It can change every day. It can be a behavior or something, whatever it is. That's how I start. And then I truly try to present one thing in my life, mostly for my business in the morning, that is most important to me. And I work that. Okay. Everything else aside. So for me right now, it's honing my message. What am I doing to get my message out there? So I'm either writing a blog post, right? I'm either preparing for a podcast. I'm listening to you, right? I'm saying, okay, what can I anticipate, right? Whatever it is, I'm preparing my message, because that's going to make my business better. Okay. I have to sell it. I have to do all these things. That's my morning. Okay. So breathing, cold exposure, either or both. And then immediately to that very important professional thing that I need to do. I get that out of the way. Okay. Then the first kid wakes up, and now we're now we're kind of scrambling.
Off to the races. Right.
Okay. So that's it. That's the morning. Now, sometimes I'll always do an ice bath. Sometimes, like this morning, I'm just going to do breathing this morning. Okay. Because I just felt like I needed to do breathing. But now what I'm going to do is at 4:00, because this is when me and my wife work on the business together. We kind of work shifts. At 4:00, I take over the kids. She gets to work. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take an ice bath at about 3:30, just to ensure that I'm there. My intention will be, I'm present with the kids. Work is done. Your wife is handling that. You're in charge of the kids now. So sometimes I need to do that at the end of the day to get into my next intention, which is to make sure I'm there for my kids. So that's kind of my habits. Those are the things that I really focus on.
Yeah, that's good. I think especially now, if there's a time that we could really use something like the breathing techniques and understanding where your awareness is, it's now, man, with these kids being home all the time. There's just a lot of people. It's, I mentioned in the last podcast, but even just driving around, you just feel it. You feel it in the air. You feel tension. Well, more than any time now, JT, you're exactly right. Because what did I say about the Wim Hof method? We know scientifically now that it reduces inflammation, right? And then the breathing, you're allowed to control your autonomic nervous system, which strengthens your innate immune system. Strengthen immune system. Yeah. I think we kind of need that, right? Strengthen immune system. So we get the COVID, we're going to be okay. Our immune system will handle it properly. Right. Same thing with stress, though. Now we know autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic system. We do the breathing system, the breathing method. We get down to zero. We relieve the inflammation caused by stress, and we start our day fresh. Is there anything else we need today more than that? A stronger immune system and ability to deal with our stress. Yeah. Errol, I really appreciate coming on, man. I've enjoyed this. This is fun. Just plug one more time. Where can people find you? Find the book?
So and let me just say before that, I appreciate this conversation more than anything, because my process and how I implement the Wim Hof method. Look, it's a leadership process. But invariably, everybody I work with, it always comes back to the personal first, which is where I intended it to go. So I really do love these types of conversations. It's the process, art, and science of leadership. How leaders inspire confidence and clarity in combat, in the boardroom, and at the kitchen table. My website is leader193.com. There's a book tab there, which will take you to Amazon, or you can go straight to Amazon. I'm on Instagram and all the other social medias, just Leader193, and I'm the only one who has that. So those are the places you can find me for leadership, my blogs, Wim Hof method, and the lot.
Good stuff, man. I appreciate it.
JT, I appreciate you. Keep it up, man. I love the theme of this show. It's good stuff.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
All right, that's it for me. JT signing out here at the Consequence of Habit podcast. Huge thanks to Errol Doebler for coming on. Please check out his book, The Process, Art, and Science of Leadership. You can find that on Amazon or leader193.com, which is his website. And like I said in the beginning of the podcast, please share this thing, man. Like it, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know if I'm doing good, bad. Bash me, pump me up, tell me I'm doing good. I don't know. Do whatever you want to do. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you guys next week.